life's way too short thinking about what happened yesterday or what you have to do tomorrow. Well, this starts all about, I have this hourglass that I like to keep on my nightstand. It's a small one, those ones you find at those thrift stores. I found it years ago and I placed it on my nightstand, and I use it as a bit of a reminder because you've got that full top of sand and I watch as it goes down and then it fills up the bottom. But I look at that like life, and I see every one of those grains of sand like my life. As a matter of fact, I've got quite a story, and if you're working well beyond 55, you really need to pay attention to this story because this absolutely hit home, and I knew somebody that had a major impact on my life. Welcome back to The Hustle, everybody, and welcome back to The Grind, and thanks for joining in again this morning. So as I focus on this hourglass and I look over at the grains of sand as they flow through, the bottom of the grains, the bottom of the glass is clearly the past, what happened behind you, and the top is the time you have left. It's a pretty simple analogy, but in reality, a lot of people spend way too much time in their past, down in the bottom with those grains of sand. They think about what they should have done, could have done, things they've said to somebody, life they didn't leave, having those regrets that, clearly just sticks with them for time. Then on the top, you have people that, you look at the future and you spend too much time thinking about all those things that you can do and all this time that you have, because when you look at that hourglass, when you first flip it upside down, that top is full. So you assume that you have all of this time in your life. Sadly, a story of mine, goes like this. I think about a situation many, many years ago. Okay, I had this relative that absolutely was brutal on their body. They drank tons of alcohol, they drank cigarettes, they stayed up late, they partied, and they did this all their life. They worked hard construction, they rough on their bodies, they're hard on everything. They lived a real tough life. And as a kid, I looked up to this relative and often thought, wow, they look pretty seasoned, pretty, even for somebody that at that time was probably, at that time when I was young, they probably would have been in their 40s, maybe 50s. And I looked at them, wow, they look so much different than a lot of my other relatives. This one looks, more tanned, more rugged, skin's a little rougher, and clearly they live a harder life. And one time I talked to that relative and they sort of shared a little story about some of the things that they've been through and some of the places and things they've seen and done. And they shared some of their stories, and then we got into this conversation about, where do you plan to go from here? And, what does your future look like? I asked them, because right after they asked me, what do I want to do for a career? And I sort of told them at the time, I don't know, I was pretty young. I just had aspirations. I like electrical stuff. I like taking things apart. And that was sort of the limits, because at that time I was a pretty simple young man and I didn't really have a lot to throw out there. But then I rebutted and asked them what their future looks like. What do they want to do when they retire? Well, this relative of mine said they'll probably never retire because the life that they've led has been really hard, tough, aggressive, and likely they won't live to see those years. They literally felt they might have 5 good years left. Well, on to what? Another 30 years? This relative sailed up to the grand old age of 85. And clearly, even with the rough, tough use of their body and the lifestyle they led, they managed to live an absolute full life. It just doesn't seem fair sometimes. Life just doesn't even make sense in many cases. Well, the flip side is, now here's another story. Many years ago, when I was in grade 4, I think about a situation where I was going to school with this young kid. And I don't know, again, whatever he was at grade 4, we were all pretty young at the time. And he was one of these kids that was just excited. He didn't have a lot of money in the family. They weren't doing particularly well for themselves. Not that it ever matters, because we're all on the same playing field when we're young, but you could just tell, the lunches he brought to school, or half the time he didn't even have lunches. His clothes were quite often very dirty, and he was just one of these kids that just sadly just did not have the means even sometimes to get by on a day-to-day. And sadly, we're hearing more and more of that today, but he was one of these kids that his grandfather was going to take him for Summer holidays. Summer holidays was rolling around. It was May, and he was getting all excited. And I remember talking to this kid very explicitly in grade 4, having this chat with this kid. And he told me he was going on a summer vacation with his grandfather. And his grandfather was going to take him to the mountains because he's never seen the Rocky Mountains in Canada, into Western Alberta, or you get into British Columbia and you see all the Rocky Mountains. I mean, you see tourists coming from across the globe to see these mountains. They're so spectacular. So this young kid, he knew he was going on this vacation. For once, his grandfather was going to treat him and take him on this road trip and show him the mountains, which he had never seen. So they got on this trip, and summer holidays came along. And of course, I didn't keep in touch. As that age, you just don't. We didn't have cell phones back then. And he wasn't a real close friend anyhow. He was just a kid that I kind of went to school with, and I knew him, and I chatted from time to time. A kid that sits like 2 desks away, and you sometimes just chat maybe at the lunch table, or you chat out at recess playing ball. But this time came. Holiday season came. He went away for summer holidays. And of course, I went for summer holidays. Then, as normal, you go to school. September rolls around. It's time to get back at it. Buying all the school supplies, get back into school, and you're hoping to see your friends that you left in the spring. Back in May, June. Now in September, you're getting back into school again, and you're excited to talk to all your friends and see all your friends and get caught up with what they did all summer. And it's just an exciting time getting back into school. But when I sat down in class and I knew this kid I went to school with in June, I looked around and I saw most of the smiling faces. Kids were laughing and cheering and making noise, and the teachers were trying to get their attention. But I could not see that one kid. I saw just about all of my other friends and classmates, because you had seen them obviously year after year after year. It seemed like every fall it's the same group. But this one kid didn't. This kid that was going with his grandfather to see the mountains, the Rocky Mountains. He wasn't anywhere. Lo and behold, a day went, a couple days went by. All of a sudden an announcement comes up on the overhead, or not in the overhead, but on the speaker system in the PA. And the principal makes an announcement. I'd like to announce an unfortunate turn of events. I have to report the loss of a student. And they mentioned his name, and it was this kid, this co-student of mine that had gone on this vacation. He passed away in the summertime. Apparently what had happened was his grandfather veered off the road in the mountains, missed a turn, and went down an embankment. And this is no word of a lie, absolutely true. And I still, to this day, that left an imprint on my mind. That truly did leave an impact. That even at that age, at 4 years of age, it's shocking how short life really can be. And so that was extremely devastating. And so that sort of stuck with me for many, many years. And well, on one hand, the old relative that treated himself rough looked at the hourglass and thought, I don't have much time left. Thought all those grains of sand at the top, I probably don't have too many left because of the way I lived. Conversely, the young guy, of course, that I went to school with, assumed because he had very little sand in the bottom, because he was young and he had the mass majority of the sand in the top of the hourglass, assumed he was actually good for many, many years. That assumption, unfortunately, fell extremely short. And the best analogy I can make is with the hourglass, because it truly does represent these assumptions that we all make. We all assume that the less time that we have behind us, the more time we have in front of us. But clearly it doesn't work that way. And as a 55-year-old now, and retired at 53, I was literally going to leave the game anyhow at 55, 56. So I had that focus. And it was moments like this that I realized that life's not a given. And too many people focus on regrets in the past and that bottom of the hourglass. And too many people focus on the top and say, you know what? I've got all this sand left. I'm good. I can do all these things later. I have all this time in front of me. I can actually just do whatever I want, take my time. I don't need to save right now. I'm going to buy all this stuff that I don't really need, but I'm just going to enjoy life right now. And maybe later on sometime I'll get down to getting it done, saving money and being responsible. But again, we don't know how long we have. And the worst part is, as more time goes on, the general assumption is that we have less and less time behind us. But it's not a given that no matter where we are in our life, that we have all this time in front of us. There's no given in that. And this is something that I realized time and time again. And now, at a mid-50s, I think to myself, the more people I see come and go, the more devastating this is to me to think about people. They get wrangled up, tied in, focused on the money, focused on the fame, focused on the title over the door, and forget about life, forget about spending that time with the family, forget about focusing on making your own personal life better on a personal level, again, with friends, the good friends, the couple of good ones you have, and your family, and your own personal health. See, because when you spend all this time focusing on your career advancements and trying to maximize your 401ks and do all of those, make all those decisions based on your finances and exclusively your finances, you wake up one day and there's an eye-opener, which I have seen over and over and over again in my life. I mean, my life is full of all kinds of interesting stories and analogies, and we all have. We've all got those stories, and I'm not unique. We're all in the same boat together on this. I have a story, guaranteed. Almost every one of you have some sort of story that you can relate to, that you can acknowledge that somebody maybe didn't focus on their own well-being and it caught up with them. Maybe they didn't focus on, managing their own personal lives. And so the way I see this, as a person who's in their 50s and even 55 like myself, I can now attest, if you've not been thinking about retiring anytime soon, and if in fact you're still working and you're not done by that age, you're not alone. But I do want to add this little suggestion or this little thought, and that not everybody's ready, whether it's financially, not everybody's ready in many ways to make a go of it. Not everybody's always ready to retire. Finances are different for everybody. Circumstances, sometimes people, they get their pensions, other people don't. Some people are born with a silver spoon, other people aren't. There's a million different reasons why you may or may not be able to retire or move on or even do something different that helps you express your inner passions and feelings and really spend more time and focus on relationships rather than work. See, we're all in a different pattern. But the only advice I would suggest at this point, because I'm living through this and I'm living proof as well that I'm living by my words. Here I'm almost 2 years out of the corporate grind and I'm loving every single day, and I still have never regretted a day of this. When will I regret it? Next week? Next month? Never. That's the way I see it. I'm spending more time with my young ones. I'm spending more time with my spouse. I'm getting a lot of, productive things, small little things around the house done. I'm just far more fulfilled, if you can say that. So from an advice perspective, and everybody's going to have their own takeaway on this, I'm not suggesting you quit today. I'm not suggesting you quit next week. I'm simply saying that it's a consideration that we have to maybe start thinking about. What does that ideal day look like for us, for you, for your neighbor, whatever, your friends, your family? What does that day look like? Do you have a focus? Do you have a goal? See, the problem is not so much calling it 50 or 55, early retirement, or 60 or 65. A lot of people just trudge through life, not really paying attention, putting the horse blinders on, working day in, day out, day in, day out, the 9 to 5 grind, the hustle, just moving through life, going through the motions, rinse, lather, repeat, as they say. And they never get to a point where they've actually set that goal in mind. They've never prioritized the savings. They've never prioritized their investments. They've never prioritized minimizing their spend. They've never prioritized, you know what, I don't need that new car, so maybe I'll use this older car longer because this will help me advance my retirement opportunities, whatever it is. And not everybody wants to retire at 50 or 55. That's another angle. Some people really love their work. The only thing I would ask is, if you really love your work, like really love it, you absolutely, it just motivates you and drives you to go to work every day, to meet these people, to drive, make change, affect change, and do big things in your career. One bad diagnosis will change all of that right now. None of those priorities, that meeting, that deliverable, that project, none of that matters at that point. Nothing. Zero. I promise you that. So that's fine to love your work, and it's great to get along with your coworkers, which I think is very important. It makes the job much easier. It makes life much easier and more fulfilled. The only thing you've got to be thinking about is, am I working too long? What does the target look like? And how do I get there? 3 simple questions, right? Am I working too long? Are you just grinding it out? Are you hating your job or your life? Well, you're probably working too long. These are questions you need to ask yourself, because as a 55-year-old, I can tell you right now, I still can't imagine working, doing the grind, hustling, getting in there till, working to 65 just because of that pension, just to maximize that pension benefit. Some people, I get it. It's a reality of life today. It's hard enough as it is, just make ends meet with all the full-time work. A lot of people finding they can't even get by with one job or even 2 jobs, let alone retirement. That's a pipe dream for many people right now. It's sad, it's disheartening. And maybe it's not a reality for some. The other piece of advice with that is just realize this. With an average life expectancy rounding off around 75, 76 years of age, you work till 67 just because you're maximizing your benefits. First of all, you're probably already dealing with doctor's appointments and some sort of chronic illness, because that generally kicks in your mid-60s. Now you're dealing with other scenarios of retiring at 67 and potentially meeting the maker at 76. You got 8 or 9 years of poor health, and that's the enjoyment. That's the freedom that we all dream about. That's his vision when they had these shiny posters and banners about retirement, and they show this pair of 80-something-year-olds together having a great time, smiling with this bank advisor. You know those pictures. You know those posters and bulletins. We all see it. Everybody's happy. But that's not really a reality in most cases. Now, some people are happy and they love it. And I know many older folks in those age groups that are content, and they seem very well sorted and well leveled, and they are very, very happy. But there's many I've met as well that have turned bitter because they wish they could have maybe made something change somewhere earlier, whatever it is. They still didn't really even have the answer in retrospect. So the advice I have is, don't quit today. The advice is, think about what really matters to you. Push come to shove. Is it your family? Is it your health? Is it that freedom so you're tired of working a job where you're getting ground down to a nub? Whatever that is, whatever matters to you, just having some freedom and family around more often than not. If that's your passion, if that's your motivation, how do you get there? You're going to have to draw your own plan. You're going to have to think about your own angle. Everybody has their own takeaway on this. Everybody has their own way to manage this. But it's just something that I find without a plan, you're never going to get there. You're going to eventually wake up. You'll be 67. You're defaulted. The company says, okay, you're gone. John, see you later. Bye-bye. Time to retire. You're not prepared, but you do it anyway, because now you were forced out and there's no other way. See, for me, I was, essentially forced out. However, I had a choice to go back. But go back to what? The hustle and the grind? Missing critical, moments with the family? Missing moments, of course, doing things I enjoy doing? Because those are things that would have been missed. I'd be getting back into the corporate space, back into the hustle, back into the grind, back into subtle conversations and undermining discussions and other kind of treatments that left you feeling isolated, hollow, and abandoned. And those are feelings I felt as I was rounding off my career, regardless of what their focus on me was, and regardless of whether the intention was, for me to leave or not, I was still having these feelings. I truly did not feel like a part of that organization anymore. For the first 10, 12 years, I was feeling on top of the world. I loved it. But there was a time, and I knew it was just time. See, the thing is, going to another corporate biz, as it were, it just feels to me very much the same thing. It's more or less the same kind of scenario that you're going to experience. It's just a group of different people. The acronyms might be a little bit different, but it's more or less the same experience. And so I knew jumping back on that proverbial saddle would result in very similar situation and feelings and thoughts of isolation and almost that feeling of outside looking in. You're looking in the window, you look in that storeroom window, you got your face to the window. You remember being as a kid, you're looking into that window and you see that toy store and you're looking inside there and I want to go in, Mom and Dad. And then they not letting you in and say, let's go, Johnny, we got to go. And you're looking in, but you're not really getting a taste, a feel for what it's like. That was my life. That was my life in the last few years. So all I can say is, if you're rolling in and you're in your 50s and you don't yet have a plan, you haven't really thought much about it because you're rolling in your career and you feel you're on the top of the world, just know this: things change in a heartbeat. Things change very quickly. And honestly, I could never be happier. Not a day of regret. And truly, this has been one of the best, probably one of the couple last year and a half, 2 years of my life, honestly, outside of the loss of the parents and dealing with that. The rest of my life has been far more fulfilled. And I would never, ever, again, ever focus on those grains of sand at the bottom or way at the top. And rather, I'm just going to live for today. I hope all of you have got a great message from this. It is a reality that we all face. And again, as well, don't be shy. Share, like, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel. Anyway, thanks again, everybody. Love to have you all join in today, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.